My name is Maryann Lombardi, and I'm the Associate Director for the Creative Affairs Office here in Washington, D.C. Welcome to the Care for Creatives Community Conversation Series on mental health. Care for Creatives is a partnership between the D.C. Creative Affairs Office and the George Washington University, which provides pay-what-you-can mental health support to any creative and entrepreneur in the D.C. area who needs it. You can find more information about Care for Creatives and how to receive care on our website at creativeaffairsdc.com. So I'm so thrilled that you could join us today on our conversation around anxiety and depression. So I'd love to take a second to introduce our esteemed guests. We have Dr. Mary DeRaedt from the George Washington University and Juice Jones from Get Home Safe. Dr. Mary, could you please introduce yourself and let folks know a little bit about what you do at GW?
Hi, I'm Dr. Mary DeRaedt, and I am the director of the school counseling program at GW and an assistant professor. I am also a clinician who sees clients through the DeRaedt Clinical Services.
Great. Thank you so much. Juice, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization, Get Home Safe?
My name's Juice Jones. I'm the owner and creator of Get Home Safe. We're an outreach program that's been running in DC for about 3 years, from 2019 to current. We've gotten a little bit under 71 people enrolled into therapy. We're about educating our community when it comes to depression and anxiety and just mental health in general. And thank you for having me here.
Yeah, so happy that you could be here with us. Can you tell us a little bit about how your organization got started?
In the summer of 2018, I lost the love of my life to depression and anxiety. And since then, I sat down with myself and I thought to myself, okay, in order to help people not go through what I've been through, what can I create that would help someone who may not have a voice for themselves? What can I create that would make a better environment around people to make it easier for them to come out about either having depression and anxiety? And how can we give them resources when it comes to better resources for getting therapy, better resources for getting medication, and better resources in terms of our education when it comes to mental health and what we do understand or may not have a correct grasp of for now.
Yes. I know that you create quite a bit of content and you have live events. How do you deliver your support and help?
Support and help mainly through Instagram and YouTube. On YouTube, you just have to type in Juice Jones, Get Home Safe. We do a lot of shorts in terms of tying in real life moments with how depression may affect your anxiety and how they're handled or not handled. So, for example, what does support look like for you? A lot of people would say, well, support is someone being there for me. And it's like, okay, let's take that a step further. Is there a certain way you would like to be supported? Is there a certain way you would like folks to speak to you in those moments? Are there certain ways that you would like to be handled if you're having a breakdown, or a favorite number or hospital you may like to go to that people need to keep in mind? Okay, in case of emergencies, when I'm losing it, if my therapist isn't enough, what's the location that I'm most comfortable with? And what does that look like for me in the future?
Yeah. So, Dr. Mary, I was wondering if you could help frame for us these terms, because it seems like anxiety and depression gets used all the time, and it's sort of like common a place to use those terms. I wonder if you could help us understand what they mean, not only from a clinical perspective, but also in the commonplace use of the language.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that question, because I loved what Juice just said about how someone could say, oh, I have support, but what does that actually mean? What does being there for you mean to the individual? Because we all have different definitions for these words in our heads. And so kind of coming up with more of an understanding of what they actually mean. So first of all, both sadness and anxiety are a general part of everyone's life. So we all experience some level of deep sadness and periods of feeling a little depressed, and also anxiety. We're supposed to feel those things. From a clinical perspective, anxiety and depression reach a level of needing a significant intervention when they start interrupting your functioning. So an example of that would be if you are consistently kind of worrying and thinking about dangerous situations that you might come across, and then you figure out a way to cope with that, that's kind of a normal anxiety approach. If you are worrying about things that could be dangerous and then you're avoiding situations that you need to be in, or you're not going to work, or you're not talking to people that you need to talk to because that anxiety is preventing you from doing that, that would be significant kind of clinical levels of anxiety. And the same for depression. Feeling like you are so sad and so unmotivated and lacking in energy and unable to kind of get yourself to do day-to-day things like sometimes for some people, it's not maybe showering as often or eating well, taking care of themselves. For others, it's not going to work or not being able to take care of their children or not feeling like they can engage socially with people and just kind of isolating at home. So when it reaches kind of that level where our day-to-day life and our quality of life is impaired by these kind of normal experiences, then that's something that we would call clinical level of depression or anxiety.
Yeah, that's super helpful. When you think of a term like emotional intelligence, this is another word that I hear often sort of in the combination with anxiety, depression, and understanding how to manage your own feelings. I'm curious for the both of you, where does this thing called emotional intelligence come into play?
Emotional intelligence is a part of everything. So let's say a famous example, you stub your toe on the edge of a bed. Right? You stub your toe, you're very angry, the person's talking to you, what's wrong? You just express anger, but instead of simply expressing anger from stubbing your toe, you explain, why are you angry? Well, I stubbed my toe and I had a sharp pain. Well, why did you have a sharp pain? Because I stubbed my toe by accident, and I may be upset over the fact that I stubbed my toe on a bed frame that's been there for years, but I seem to always stub my toe once a week. What does stubbing your toe once a week feel like? Well, it feels painful, but it's something repetitive that I should be able to avoid. But instead of avoiding it, I still having all these things going on in my head in the morning, go through the process of stubbing my toe once a week once things are a little bit too much. And then you take it to another step of maybe you have too much on your plate, and having less on your plate lowers the probability of stubbing your toe, which would lower the probability of you having an angry morning, which would lead you to a better start. And emotional intelligence is identifying the process of how you got there or why you may be in a certain mood or an emotion and what it's related or correlated to.
Absolutely. I think the only thing I would add to that is that there is a layer two of emotional intelligence, that is the ability to kind of read other people and read situations and recognize both the ability to read other people's emotions, but also the limitations of our ability to correctly interpret why they are having that emotion. So that social interactive part of it is a second layer of emotional intelligence.
I'm curious about this idea of short-term versus long-term relationships with depression and anxiety, right? Like short-term, being able to get over sadness or get over, feeling anxious sort of in the moment versus really being able to understand those terms in the long scope, right? Like sprint versus marathon ideas, right? Like how do we help ourselves see the difference between that, right? Like understand, because you said, Mary, that you everyone's going to have feelings of sadness. Everyone's going to have feelings of being anxious. But how do we recognize when it's more long-term versus where it's short-term?
Yeah. So I think and I also want to hear Dwight's perspective, Juice's perspective on this too, because I think it's when you are experiencing something and, there is a specific reason for it, or, you have short-term stress around a move or a job loss or something like that. And, it happens, there's kind of a peak to it, and then you kind of learn to cope with it, and then you adapt. That's kind of a normal flow. But when you find yourself 2-3 months and you're consistently still feeling that same level, you're maybe even feeling a little worse. Maybe time is going by and you are consistently feeling those feelings, then it's really important to recognize that marathon wears on you, that long-term depression, that long-term anxiety over time. Your body can get used to it, but you lose something. You lose your energy level, you lose your ability to cope as effectively. And it actually has been shown to have long-term effects on our physical health as well, with increases in heart disease and diabetes and substance abuse long-term. So I think recognizing when something has been going on long enough that it's just been too long, and you need to figure out a way to kind of step in and reach out for some sort of help.
And to add on to Mary's point in terms of depression and anxiety sometimes being a marathon, let's touch on the words, you should just get over it. When you have depression and anxiety, it's not, I have a day and I'm sad. It's, I woke up in sadness and I'm working through the sadness into a better day. So depression and anxiety, it's not scheduled. It's not something that you're like, oh, you can see it coming at all times for a lot of people. It's more of, you're running this marathon, and as you run the marathon, there aren't any coaches, there aren't any referees. There's no one who says, hey, here's a bottle of water, you get to take a break. You're running without permission of trying to run the race or choosing to run the race. And you're trying to figure out, what can I do for myself to handle this situation that I'm in, that many people may not understand. Because for people on the outside looking in, they're like, well, I've been sad before, so you should be able to be happy. But for you, it's not that I've never been happy before. It's that I have this sadness that I'm not able to lead, that goes with me everywhere. It's in my bowl of cereal. It's with my toothbrush in the morning. It's with me in the shower. It's with me as I read my favorite book. And even when it comes to finding things that bring you joy in terms of like wellness, for example, so doing yoga, it may be with you on the yoga mat as you're doing yoga, but you're using yoga to work your way through what that situation is and thinking through the physical manifestation of what depression or anxiety may do to you also internally.
Yeah. This makes me think of this idea about experiencing something versus being something, right? Like people say, I am, like, you are not your anxiety, but you may be experiencing your anxiety. You know,
Yes.
and it makes me think about how the language you use to either process or be with those feelings would be important.
Yeah. I loved what Juice said about the depression maybe with you on the mat when you're doing yoga. I think that's such a wonderful image, because it's very true. It's this thing that is a part of what you're experiencing, but it is not who you are. And being able to say, I'm experiencing depression, I'm experiencing anxiety, and recognize it as something that you can have an effect on. It may be a companion for a while, it may be a companion for a long while, but it is still just a companion.
Yeah.
It is not who you are.
And the importance of therapy is, how do you handle this new companion that you may not have been aware of was a companion in your life that does come with you? So therapy is giving you the awareness of, okay, you've had this thing that's been with you. We now have a name for what this thing or person is. How should we talk to that person? Because when it comes to therapy, you're learning to communicate with yourself, because it is a part of you. So it's not who you are, but it is a part of you. So how do you handle this part of you correctly? And how do you give homage to making that more of a strength in terms, instead of just a weakness or something that's heavy at all times? Because you could learn a lot from these moments in terms of who you may be or who you may allow yourself to become one day, and how important that is.
Yeah. So can we talk a little bit about the role that therapy plays in supporting folks who may be working through their anxiety or depression? Like, when does a therapist come into the mix?
Well, I mean, I can start and say that I think that the therapist comes into the mix, from my perspective, whenever you are at a place where you feel like it would be useful to have that outside source to talk about these things, where maybe for some people that happens quickly and they reach out and they know therapy is useful. And so they start to feel depressed and they go, okay, I need to get in contact with a therapist. But for other people, they may reach out to community members. They may reach out to family. They may try to use some of their coping skills and supports, and then maybe get feedback that, therapy might be a good point. This might be a good point to start therapy. I think the value of therapy is having someone who has walked that path, or to use our earlier analogy, run that marathon with a lot of people. And the therapist can give you some ideas of not just how to cope with it, but how to understand it, how to recognize what is going on in your brain, where it maybe came from, how long it's been there, help you kind of put perspective on some of the things that have happened in the past that might have been affected by anxiety or depression. And it's also a safe space where, I may go to a sister or a friend and say, oh, this is what I'm experiencing. And then if I know them very well, I have the option to ignore them because I think, oh, they're just my friend or my sister or they have their own agenda, right? We tend to come up with reasons not to listen to some people in our life, but a therapist is someone who's only there to help you, is just there to try to help you achieve the goal of reducing the struggle that you're experiencing. And so it's sometimes easier to listen to them and to engage with them and to share with them and trust that they do have your best interest at heart. Reduces the ability to dismiss them a little bit.
I'm going to go against the grain in terms of advice that parents have given us. To not trust strangers. We need strangers. The importance of a therapist is love is a very heavy product that's in a lot of facets of our life, whether it be friendships, associates, loved ones in terms of family members. And that layer of love and kindness sometimes get in the way of someone listening to you and getting to the root of the problem. So the benefit of a therapist is you pay this person whose goal is to focus on what your issue may be, whether you realize it or not, because you can go in for a therapy session and discover there's a whole bag of different things that you may not be acknowledging that a loved one may not be brave enough to tell you, or they may not allow themselves to see because there's so much love and care in what they want that's best for you in terms of their mind versus where you are. That's number one. Number two, the other significance of a therapist is they can give us the right tools of what we may need to use on ourselves, whether it's practices, whether it's the advice that we may need to give our loved ones in terms of how we need to be handled or how you discover you need to be handled. And when I say handled, it can be the way someone talks to you. It could be the sentence structure itself, maybe taking a little bit more pauses for important parts. It could be slowing down and not moving around as you have the conversation with them for things that are important. And the significance of a therapist is you pay for what you get. So not only are you paying for what you get in terms of the service, in terms of talking to a stranger, you can build a relationship with that stranger who is your therapist, and you guys can build in the right direction of what you may need that you may not be able to see yourself, and finding that middle ground with yourself.
Mm. So are there therapists that specialize in anxiety or depression, or are all therapists sort of trained to be working in these areas?
Well, I can answer from the professional perspective that while all therapists are trained, and I do that training, to understand and treat anxiety and depression, post-graduation, most therapists will create specialties. They will get themselves extra training and added support and learning in terms of how to handle certain things. And so you do want to find a therapist. If you're dealing with anxiety and depression, you want to find a therapist that does have an expertise in that is stating either on their website or when you talk to them that they have taken that extra step to get special skills in terms of providing support for specifically anxiety and depression. And that goes for any topic that you are hoping to work on in therapy, even beyond anxiety and depression.
I was just going to ask a little bit about the process for finding a therapist, especially if you are navigating your own anxiety and depression, which I can imagine adds a layer to the process of seeking out a therapist that might make it even much more challenging. So I'm curious, from both of your perspectives, any insights or tips or best practices that you may be able to share around ways of finding a therapist.
I'm going to let Dwight go first because he has actually introduced me to a great way of finding a therapist that I am embracing and think is awesome. So I'm going to let him start.
Okay. Within my platform, Get Home Safe, we bring the therapist to the function. So what we've done for the last 3 years is we've thrown events where I bring Black therapists, because that's the community that I cater to for the most part, to the function. I want people to be able to see someone who has a similar face and can relate to their experience and pull them over to the side, say, hey, I have something I may be dealing with. Would you have any time after this event for us to meet and talk privately? So what I do is we bring the therapist to the function. We like for people to inquire about whether this therapist is a right fit for them. The therapists that we work with are based in Virginia, DC, and Maryland. So those are the areas that we cover. And outside of therapists that I work with personally, who I know in person, there are therapists that I sometimes put in my IG stories or who I'm working on featuring on my channel. So outside of that, what I do on my YouTube is I'll have one-on-one sit-downs with the therapist, because I would like to humanize the experience of a therapist, because at the end of the day, we're all working with people. So the more they're able to tell their story within the conversations that we have, the more someone could say, oh, I like Whitney Houston too. This may be someone I'm interested in. Oh, I love pasta. This may be a therapist that's a right fit for me. And these sound like very small moments, but it's so much bigger because relatability is not easy. A lot of folks think I'm a person, you're a person, we should be able to relate automatically. And it's like, no, people have preferences. People have political parties they may align with. People have certain taste buds they may enjoy. People have jokes that they tell over and over, not because it makes the room laugh, but because it makes them comfortable enough to be themselves. So how do I help you find the right person for you to help me help you? And that's what we've done within Get Home Safe. So my suggestion would be to come to a Get Home Safe event where we have wellness and mental health. But outside of that, right now, we're working on a partnership with GW, hopefully at the beginning of September, to get people more access to low-cost therapy outside of the therapists that I work with. So let's say the therapists I work with right now aren't a good fit for you. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to have access to other resources when it comes to therapy or what you may need for yourself. So that's the best answer I have right now.
Yeah, I think I need to add the if my next therapist does not like tacos, I think I should use that as like a no-go. Yeah, I like the pasta one. I'm going to add that to the next time I'm seeking a therapist as the questions I ask. Dr. Mary,
therapist, can I just advocate for a hierarchy of things that are important to you?
What, are you trying to tell me that my taco needs are not important enough?
If they are, if that's on your hierarchy, then yes, it should be. I'm just saying. Okay. No, but what I just wanted to add that, number one, I think that people sometimes worry if they meet a therapist and it's not a good match and they're sitting there listening and going, okay, I don't really know if I want to talk to this person every week for the next few weeks. They may worry that the therapist is going to get hurt or that they are going to be rude, or I don't want to say that I don't think this is a good fit. And so I'm just going to take this opportunity to tell everyone listening that therapists from the very beginning are trained to understand. They are told over and over again in their program. And then once they get in the community, they know it, that you are not a good fit for everyone. So I know I am not a good fit for everyone. I have had clients that have started with me and they're like, I think I'm going to find someone else because my style isn't right for everyone. And so I think just be your own advocate and recognize that you don't, while I there is that feeling of, I don't want to hurt this person's feelings, or I don't want to reject them, or I don't want them to feel bad. It's your therapy, and the therapist knows that. And they know and want you to get what you need. So be willing to speak up if someone doesn't really fit for you and isn't really someone that you feel safe with. But also, I think, take a minute and, like I said about tacos, really think about what your hierarchy of needs is, because sometimes, especially right now, there's a lot of need, and some places are overloaded. So knowing what your foundational things are, whether it's their personality, a cultural match, an issue match, meaning like I'm working on kind of recovering from anxiety, this person has a specialty in that. Thinking about how important each of those things are in terms of finding a therapist that'll fit for you is another really good thing. But I really like this idea of meeting them ahead of time, talking to them on a more personal basis, not just an assessment session, and being able to feel comfortable as you're looking for a therapist.
And then also to add to your point, and I think this is very important in terms of advocating for yourself as someone who's looking for therapy, because not all therapists are going to be the right fit for you as a person who's shopping around for a therapist or what therapy would look like for you. You have to treat the process of finding the right fit for you like dating. Reaching out to get help for yourself, whether it's self-improvement or it's for anxiety and depression, you're going to have to give yourself chances to experience new people who may be the right fit for you in terms of therapy. Mm-hmm. And because it's, for certain people, I've heard it's been disheartening. For certain people, it's been encouraging. You're going to have to learn to pick yourself up. And I know that's hard to hear for someone who may be dealing with depression or anxiety, picking yourself up, because every day you wake up and it's like, I got up out of my bed. That's already picking myself up. You go to get therapy because you would like more to your experience. And this is what it's about. Life is an experience. So give yourself a chance to find the best experience for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I'm just thinking about what a great resource Get Home Safe is for folks. Like, are there other resources or kinds of support that the two of you could suggest while people are going through the process of finding a therapist? Are there like podcasts or books or other organizations like yours, Juice, that could help people as they're not only trying to figure out either day-to-day tools as they're trying to get more deeper long-term health, but things that could help them as they're moving through this?
I have a friend, Kier Gaines. He's done a great job on social media in terms of being a girl dad. He's a licensed therapist. He cares about the community around him. And when you go to his channel, he makes so many topics that he touched that may pertain to depression or anxiety accessible and digestible. He does a really great job on that. Outside of people you'd be able to reach out to or take a look at, because not everything's about reaching out. A big component of Get Home Safe is the wellness community. We'd like to bring the wellness community together with the mental health community. So with that being said, I suggest people do a yoga class one day, see what does that feel like, because it's a yogi's responsibility to lead you within the class. So yoga, from what people say or see, it's like, oh, it's stretching. Stretching is great. It's like, yeah, but yoga is about feeling through your body. Where does the pain come from? Where does the ache come from? What do you do within your everyday life, which may pertain to how you walk or how you sit, and how that adds or takes away from the pain? Tibetan sound bowls, that's another experience that we've incorporated within the Get Home Safe platform in terms of meditation, sitting down with your own thoughts, which is a wild concept when it comes to the topic that we're talking about today. But sometimes you need to touch your thoughts and see how they touch you back, and see what are you handling on the daily that you may not be handling with a purpose. So when it comes to therapy, especially depending on how much money you may or may not be making, you may on average be able to see your therapist, if you're lucky, 2, maybe 3 times a month, which sounds like a heavy schedule because it's like, well, this is something I have to afford. Okay, how can I incorporate wellness within my schedule in a month? So like, let's say you go and you see a therapist the first week of the month, second week of the month, you get yoga on Tuesday, because we're talking about tacos, Taco Tuesday. And you go and you have Tibetan sound bowls on Saturday. And then the follow-up week, you're right back in therapy and you're sitting down, you're talking about your issues or things that you may not be aware of. And then on Saturday, oh my God, we're right back to yoga. And that's the process of what wellness and release looks like for you, leading back on to what's important for you to work through your mind.
Yeah. I really love all of those suggestions. I think one of the things that you mentioned that is so important is this idea of, yes, you may be in therapy once a week for 50 minutes, 60 minutes, but it's the time in between and how you take care of yourself and focus on wellness, which it takes away from, I need to get these symptoms gone, and takes into, I just need to feel good, right? I need to take care of myself, which I like. I think two podcasts that I recommend as a starting point, and then you really have to kind of find ones that fit your personality and your interests. One I love is Hidden Brain, which is a broad, just look at the way the brain works. It's not specifically targeted at you and feeling better, but I think it promotes that emotional intelligence that Juice was talking about earlier. And I think that it's a starting point for exploring different topics that you might hear on that podcast and then find new resources about it. Another one that I've recently discovered that I think is really helpful is Maryann has a podcast that she's very accessible and very outgoing and friendly, and she engages in discussing a lot of really important topics in mental health from an accessibility standpoint. And she usually has a therapist or someone on there to interview, and she's a neuroscientist, so she has something to offer. But it's kind of a fun way to hear someone else talking about their issues and how they work through them, and then hear a therapist kind of give feedback on that. And I think those are podcasts like that tend to be a little bit more informative for you without kind of you getting therapy. You get a chance to kind of watch someone else experience some things and learn some different topics. As for books, I can provide a list. It's hard to come up with a specific book. But I think if you are someone who likes to read, I first of all feel like you need to acknowledge if you're someone who likes to listen to books or someone who likes to read books. Because if you're going to buy 5 books, but you never read any of them, they just sit there. I wish they would go in your head through osmosis, but they don't. So if you are someone who is more oriented toward listening, then, maybe look into some audiobooks that you could listen to, or kind of dig through issue-wise, topic-wise at most bookstores and online. You can find multiple books by different authors that kind of touch on the topics that you may need support with. There's one that's the Anxiety Workbook that is a really broad one, but a lot of people use it and find it really helpful.
Well, I thank you guys so much for spending your time with us and sharing about your insights, expertise, and the work that you do in the community. So Dr. Maryann, Juice, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you guys again soon.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.